Today I thought I would film this video in a natural area of the city I now live in, which is Calgary, Alberta. There is a lot of beautiful open space here. Alberta has some of the most green cities with the most beautiful natural areas, so I'm so lucky for that, and that's where we are today. Today we are at Lakeview, and it's a beautiful evening. It's not as remote here as when I was living in the mountains, so there are people walking around everywhere looking at me funny, and I don't mind. Now, for those of you who may be new to my channel, I just want to say hi and welcome to all my new subscribers. On this channel, we're pretty much devoted to finding out our inner truths and living our best lives possible and finding a way to do it in a manner that lets us be free from financial worry. I am someone who follows an inner path. I have for a very long time. It's made me kind of an odd person in society, and I quite like it that way. Now, I just thought I would explain for this video. I'm going to be talking about the teachings of Jesus. And I get a lot of questions, people asking me what religion I am and do I believe in God and things like that. So I think before we get started in this, I'm going to tell you what I do believe. So I am not a Christian, I'm not a Catholic. I was raised in a Catholic school and I studied the Bible, as part of my curriculum in school and part of being in the church. I was fascinated by the stories of Jesus and by his teachings, and I love the myth and the parables. I love it. The Bible is a beautifully interesting work of human archetypes and things that speak to the human spirit. But my whole life I have been on a search for the inner truth of God and reality and life and being human and what it all means. I have had 3 near-death experiences in my life, and so I've technically been dead 3 times already. I've experimented with certain psychedelics, and that will be coming up as well. I've explored my dreams in depth through journaling, lucid dreaming. I've gone to therapists, I've gone to experts, around the world, and just kind of gathered all this information that kind of helped me form my view of the world. And within that, I've been able to find what feels right for me. I've been able to hear that inner voice. I've been able to hear the voice of God, comforting me, encouraging me. And through the near-death experiences I've had, and through the psychedelics experiences that I've had, I have been led to believe that my purpose here in life was preordained before I came here. Now, I've studied New Age teachings and philosophies. A lot of them say that you choose your life and everything like that, and I believed that for a long time because it seemed to make the most sense to me logically. But from my own experience, this is what seems to be true for me, which might be different for you. And I have had an inner feeling from a very young age that I'm here to do great things. But that is a subjective idea. Great things. I know a lot of us feel pressure to perform and to accomplish and to succeed and to do great things. But I don't really feel that kind of pressure anymore. I used to, a little bit. I can't say that it was pressure so much that as it was just a feeling that I had inside. So anyway, my understanding of the teachings of Jesus are that Jesus explained how to get to God, how to work with God in life. So my understanding is that God is the force within, the deeper calling, the thing that remains after everything else is gone, the thing that exists inside of everything. That's God to me. And Jesus, a lot of his teachings teach you how to work with God to survive in life. It's not lost on God and Jesus that, a lot of being a human is the concern with survival and with thriving, so being successful financially. Because, all of our fears and worries and desires about money are tied in to fundamentally our sense of survival. Right? So anything that you can think of that you want money for contributes to your health and survival. And there are some great quotes in the Bible about this. One of my favorites is where Jesus says, is the body but meat and flesh? Are your clothes just raiments? Is this what you're concerned with? You're concerned with food and clothing? And he says, don't store up your treasure where the thieves can rob it and where it can mold and it can wilt away. Those things are of the earth. Store up your treasure in the Lord God. Which, store up, and when I think of that, I think of all the people out there. I get a lot of concerns from people saying like, very, very earthly concerns, like, what podcast should I listen to, or how many how many subscribers should I have to my newsletter, and what should I do with this particular thing and that. And there is a place for process and for this kind of knowledge, but it starts with the right mindset. It starts with the right state, the right inner state. That's where it all begins. And when you have that right inner state, everything else falls into place. And the more you practice being quiet with yourself, listening to yourself, heeding that inner voice, praying, meditating, the more clear that voice will become to you. A lot of times we see people who seem so authentic. They follow that voice. It's so clear to them. And some, other people, you're like, I'm just not getting that. I don't feel that voice. I don't know what to do. And I would just say, take yourself back from the world. Are you worried about your body? Are you worried about your clothes and the roof over your head? Those things are gone. They come and go. So when you're in that place where you are just frustrated with some earthly thing, just step back and get quiet and just wait sometimes. I had this experience when I was moving from the mountains where I had my vehicle was in the shop, and it was a ways into town to get to the shop, drop my vehicle off. And I ended up taking a cab back to my place in the mountains. And I would pick up, I thought, I'll just get the cab and I'll go back and pick up my truck later that day. The cab picked me up, and I would say in general, people treat me really, really absurdly well in life. I have some kind of luck where I just encounter the nicest, sweetest, best people all the time. And they're so helpful and kind to me. But this cab driver was a bit different. He was immediately screaming and complaining, and he just started ranting about living here to me and how much he hated it. And it was weird because I was leaving. That's why I was going through this process, because I was in the process of leaving that place, even though I loved it. And so it was just like a weird coincidence. And he was shouting and waving his arms around and going off, and I just completely zoned out at that point. It was early in the morning. I think I remember telling him, like, no, I don't really think it's that bad, and I'm sorry, but I don't really want to hear this right now. I just flat out said that to him. So it was like a kind of an awkward ride. I got back, I gave him the money. And then when my vehicle was ready to pick up later in the day, I online Googling, trying to find a cab, and no other cabs would come out to that area. I mean, it was in the boonies, and my neighbors were gone, and it's not walking distance. And I just remember being so frustrated and thinking, I don't want to have to call this cab guy again. I don't want to deal with that attitude again. And I was I spent like maybe half an hour just frustrated, calling all these cab companies, saying, can I pay you extra? You know, just thinking, like, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna get out there to get my vehicle back? And I just caught myself in this thing where I just felt like my wheels were spinning and I just wasn't getting the results I wanted. And so finally I looked and like half an hour had gone by, and here I am trying to get this cab, and something just told me, okay, just leave it. Just chill, just leave it. So I just gave it up. I said, you know, I've got a couple hours to spare. We'll see what happens, who knows. And so I did some housework because I was moving. I went onto my Facebook and I went and attended to the private Facebook groups I had listed all my belongings in, because I was selling them all in these Facebook groups, and I had got a new message. And it was from a man who was in a town that was about 45 minutes away, and he wanted to come and pick up my blender. He wanted to buy my Vitamix blender. I said, oh, great. No, sorry, let me, when do you want to come? He said, yeah, I'll come by in the next hour or so if that works for you. I said, that's great. And then I realized that after he came to pick it up from my house, he'd be traveling right back past the place where my vehicle was. So I sent him a message. I said, hey, I need to get dropped off in town, and I can knock $10 off the price of that if you wouldn't mind dropping me off. And it was on Facebook, so you can kind of see what kind of person it is. You know, it wasn't like a complete stranger. I figured someone who was using a Vitamix blender is probably a pretty good person. He just messaged me back, said, yeah, that's no problem. Problem was solved. But the interesting thing about this one is that when he got to my house, he was telling me a bit about his life in Fernie, which is the BC town that was kind of where he lived. And he goes, yeah, you know, I hear a lot of great things about this area from all my different fairs. And I just said, wait a minute, what do you mean fair? He said, oh yeah, I'm a taxi driver. Now, taxi drivers in this area are so hard to come by, it's not even funny. And the fact that, you know, I listened to that voice, I went inside, I calmed down, I gave it over to the powers that be, and they sent a taxi right to my front door within an hour. Those kind of things happen all the time in my life, and you know, they call them synchronicities, and you can increase the synchronicities in your life when you stop focusing on being of the world and you store your treasures up on the inside, you know, where nothing can touch them. So instead of worrying about, you know, what will I wear today? What am I gonna do? You know, how many clients am I gonna go get? Maybe just every once in a while, just step back and think, how am I gonna show up in the world? What is important to me in life? Who am I outside of all of the conditioning? Who am I outside of all of the trauma from my life, from my past, from the judgments of people I don't know, from the judgments and expectations of my family? Who am I? That's will connect you with that voice. And I say to do that every once in a while. But to be perfectly honest, I would recommend to do that as often as you can. I mean, that's how I've lived my life. And by doing that, I have found a bit of magic that is always with me. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's always with me. I think a lot of it has to do with that awareness and allowing that influence into your life. I know myself, having grown up in a single parent family on welfare, there were so many times, I mean, just looking back, I mean, I struggled a lot with finances later in my life. Like when I left home when I was 16. So I had a lot of times, you know, in my early 20s and things like that, where like I would sell CDs at the bookstore so I could have dinner that evening, and it would be something cheap. You know, I had multiple jobs at a time, and I had the energy for it. I was driven to do it. You know, I wanted to go to school to become a veterinarian. But there were so many times when I was young that we were poor, and if you had you know, any kind of logic and reasoning about it, if you had looked, okay, this is how much money we have, these are the things we need to cover, and here's how long it needs to last for, I mean, it would have made absolutely no sense. But it all worked out. It's just a reminder that we don't live on bread and water alone, but the Word of God. You know, the energy of the universe, of the Spirit, of whatever God that you follow, that's what says whether you live or die, whether your time here is up or not. I guess God likes to check in on me every once in a while. It's been 3 times so far. But that's who makes the final decision. That space within yourself that none of the circumstances of the world that are going on around you can touch. And I feel like that is the most important thing. So, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you again soon.